we're having a roundtable in virtual production.
There's artistry combined with the tech. There's not one button that makes a photo real.
They come to us because we're Lux and because they know the projects we've done.
It means not AAA, it's AAA quality for absolutely everything.
I watched the behind the scenes of The Mandalorian and said, I want to go do that.
What are the people that you have on your team that you're like, I'm never letting you go?
Technical artist is always challenged. The person who technical enough to accomplish artistic art.
Virtual production is affordable even in indie film budgets.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ninelle Anderson. I'm CEO of Devoted Studios, and I'm your host at Devoted SpeakEasy. Today, we're having a roundtable in virtual production, and with me, I have masters of virtual production industry, Joan Webb, who is a president at Roninfilm. Hi, John.
Hello.
Dani Bellar Pilukas, who is a director of physical production at Machina Consulting, right? Hi, Dani. And Vitalii Boiko, who is a CEO at Pixela Labs and a creator of And Display. Hi, Vitalii.
Hey.
Hey. Well, do you guys want to start with introducing yourself? Couple words of how did you get into virtual production and why are you the expert of it? Vitalii, you want to start?
Yeah, of course. Well, I've been, engaged and married to 3D worlds for almost 20 years. I started my career in game development arena. And over time, I tried all kinds of different niches and specialties. I've been into a variety of enterprise projects, and luckily ended up in the virtual production in Unreal Engine with Epic and many other cool people around. So what happened that we started work on And Display back in 2014, the goal to make Unreal Engine scalable. 5 years forward, after our start, Epic saw us on the horizon, acquired the tech from us, and kept us all around for all those years. We've been lucky enough to engineer and display and for virtual production purposes, aside from many other niches, it's been used as well. And these days, we're trying to assist everybody with their needs and display and surrounding projects within the ecosystem of virtual production.
Thank you, Vitalii. And can you elaborate for all the viewers is why is And Display so important for virtual production? Like, what did it that enable to create in the industry?
Many people consider the whole tech as revolutionary, but in fact, it's more evolutionary technology because the whole idea has been 100 years old since the very first approaches to create virtual backplate. Probably remember the movies from 50s or 60s, kind of car driving shots where people had kind of fake moving background. Even films like Gravity, Lux is famous for, made with pre-recorded rendered videos with LED panels. However, those LEDs, those are tiny lamps within the array of panels, results in a huge amount of pixels. Typical stage can go in tens of thousands of pixels. You can think of 15 4K frames to be rendered. It's simply impossible to carry on with a single GPU at all. That's why to power such a humongous amount of pixels, you need an array of computers, each rendering each own section with required frame rate, 24, 50 FPS. That's why you need a cluster of those machines. However, aside from, hardware side, there's plenty of software, problems. You have Unreal running individually as a separate application as each computer, and you need to sync application, and I mean the, Unreal world between the nodes. You'll need to sync the output of the frame to the display. There's many problems arises from the fact that you have disconnected computers that need to be connected. So then displays solve this problem. It allows to scale the real world to as much as needed computers, screens.
Thank you, Vitalii, for sharing. When I hear all those details and I'm like, well, it sounds like only tech people are working in all the knowledge that you have to obtain, then only tech people can work in virtual production. But I believe Dani is actually coming from physical production, right? And now rocking the virtual production world as well. Dani, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you switched from building physical locations for Star Wars and now being in virtual production as well?
Yeah, I think I come from more of a like technology and how do we do it for physical things. Like previous to working in virtual production, I was an automation person. I worked for Cirque du Soleil. I was their first female head of automation, building like large, technical shows with flights and all these things and flying performers. And the software that I used for that, we translated into using for show control for Imagineering. So my last job before transferring was building attractions for WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering, such as the Pirates of the Caribbean ride in Shanghai and the Star Wars attractions on both coasts in California and Florida. They use a lot of this technology, right? We use large video screens that multiple people are seeing across 20 feet, and we use parallax so it looks like you're looking out on an ocean, not just a video wall that's been painted on the side of a building. We want you to really get that feeling of motion and access. And so that was what I was doing. And then the pandemic came along and I watched the behind the scenes of The Mandalorian and said, I want to go do that. That looks like the next technological step. I had just spent all this time with Imagineering saying, this technology is cool. This is all the stuff we can do. And we'd done a lot of it, and Galaxy's Edge is an incredible, like all of that technology coming together. And then it was time to go, okay, what do I want to go figure out next? So I taught myself a little bit of Unreal. I basically got a guy on a level, set him on fire and made him turn himself out, put himself out, and moved on. And then I learned a little bit about blueprints, which were a lot like my former programming life, and joined Lux. And at Lux, what I discovered was there's a lot of people who are so good at the software and understanding how it works, but we didn't have a large team of logistics and producing and how do we make all of that actually happen and how do we get everyone where they need to be. And so that's a lot of what I do now is I handle the logistics and the conversations with clients and talking about what we're doing.
Love it. And so John is coming from a full movie background, right? You've been producing movies and commercials for a very long time and now switching to virtual production. Can you share a little bit more like what made you make a jump and like what are the benefits that you're feeling enhance your production and the creatives that you're creating right now?
Well, actually, I think it was like 2018. I got wind of this, but I really couldn't understand it. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then in 2019, I started to understand, and my business partner and director, Peter Hiaguchi, he was hired to develop a script for someone, and they couldn't get it financed. And I said, hey, if you do it this way, you could get a mega grant. And of course, the first reactions to this sort of tech was, hey, I'm a gamer. I would never put that in my films, I won't use the explicitives, but at any rate, it took a while, to kind of pull the team in. And once I showed him an example, it took him a half a second. Then he really saw it. But, people were like, oh, that'll never work or whatever, except Dave Stump. He came on full-heartedly because he had been doing virtual production years and years prior. So we were focused on virtual production and engine. Oddly enough, when we were first on the journey, we spoke with Lux. We had mega grant money, but we didn't have enough to share that much with Lux. So we, through my family, friends, and rock and roll contacts, my family was with Journey and Doobie Brothers and many more bands. They were in the world of concerts, and one friend was shooting J-Lo live in Brazil and talking about LED volumes. So I inquired with him as to who, what. So we got a bunch of, we got about $4 million in kind services in about 3.5 weeks once I started rolling real hard on we need support. So we got Creative Technology to allow us to utilize their stages and their brain bar and all that for free. So really, because of the lack of money that we had and the small team that we had on the onset of trying to figure it out, it was our benefit. So we had to do everything soup to nuts and on our own with 8 people. And we directed it. We did all the, vet. We were co-running the brain bar with them as we were learning. And it really became our advantage because we started consulting other stages for builds, for builds that were already done that they didn't understand. They had this tech and didn't know how to use it. So just because of the amount of time and discoveries we had in engine, people started asking us because it was all new and everyone's buying things off the shelf and they don't know the difference in product A and product B. And they wanted to know what we felt about different tech and how it worked for us. So that's kind of how we naturally grew and got into virtual production. And we're still learning and sharing and speaking about it. We're total evangelists and just rocking it hard, having fun though.
It sounds like the majority of people who are just getting into virtual production, they have an understanding that the Mandalorian is virtual production. And I feel like Avatar and the virtual production used in Avatar is not really spoken as much as comparing to Mandalorian, because the Mandalorian is more like in-camera virtual production. Avatar has different technology, like how they use it. Can you guys share a little bit more on the Avatar, but also what are the other deployment of virtual productions that you're seeing?
I think that's one of the challenges is sometimes a buzzword becomes a buzzword and then encompasses a new thing completely. So in-camera visual effects, which is what was done on Mandalorian, which is captured in the game engine is captured in camera. Some of that becomes final pixel. Is different than what virtual production really is. Virtual production includes simulcam and a lot of things that have been happening. Like Joan said, all in engine, well before we ever had a video screen and well before we were using an Unreal Engine, we were filming things and seeing them on set live and what the expectation was and where we were going to go. We were using motion capture to create productions. So, my friend who worked on the first Avatar, every time someone says virtual production in place of in-camera visual effects, she's like, I was doing that 20 years ago. So there's always that. And James Cameron himself, he shared recently at the DGA this great background of what he was doing on the new film and all the new tools and things that he's bringing forward. So we need to remember that those pioneers who pushed that, James Cameron, Jon Favreau, who are the people who figure out how to get money to push these things forward, are hugely important to the industry because they allow all the independent spaces, all the little spaces to still use the tools that Vitalii and his team have created in order to do that next step. Somebody has to come in with the money. And Epic has done that pretty significantly through mega grants and for a lot of teams.
Is there any other forms that you feel people should be considering more usage of virtual production than just movies and live events and commercials?
We're doing documentaries, we've done shorts, just any content. It's the future of all content creation.
Yeah, there's a lot of live broadcast that's going out,
right? And yeah, exactly. And it depends on what the project needs. I think a lot of people are like, wow, we want to do virtual production, we're going to do in camera visual effects, and they have certain ideas, but it's really about what works for the shot. A big part for us is because we are so nimble and indie, we have to really be aware of budgets. We aren't out there competing with Mando, although, our workflow is much more efficient and effective, but we've had to do it very grassroots. But we had 2 artists in 2.5 months to slam 100 beautiful virtual production shots that brought up the quality of the film, just an enormous level. So what we were wanting to share is that, yes, virtual production is affordable, even in indie film budgets, So that's kind of our take. You don't have to go to the wall, but of course we do, and we love going to the wall, but not every shot needs it. And not every shot should be recommended for that.
I think some other spaces like we're seeing theaters that are now using, an LED wall with a game engine to expand their space. Obviously, Imagineering's using it in spaces to see, it's a virtual thing that we're seeing. So I think there's a lot of spaces that are using pieces of this technology. Broadcast events are a big one, right? All of the upfronts, all of those things, people are standing on virtual stages now, which is kind of fun to see what they can do with that. And also award shows. A lot of the award shows have used virtual production in order to place their hosts in other areas. So I think you're seeing it in a lot of areas. And I'm really excited about where it's going from an independent standpoint.
Vitalii, is there any other areas that you've seen your clients or people coming your way deploying the technology?
We did try the episodic, we did try commercials, we did try live events, we did previews for a variety of productions. And I'll say that, you can expand this virtual production, very blurry line, wider and wider, gathering more and more fields, areas, niches in general, but specifically to media, let's say, production, to area where all of us are kind of focused on them. Each area is very different. And at some point, I put a stop to all our experiments because, well, if you're in a live event and this is your major focus, working with broadcast, I mean, it's its own world, its own set of tools, own set of television pipelines, professionals, specialists, and mixing this up with feature films, well, it's really hard. It's really hard. That's why historically we had coming to the other niches where the tech is used. Oh, it's pretty wild. People putting this scalability kind of capabilities. Well, you can Google up the Dallas AT&T project by manufacturer. So they got the whole building section covered with LEDs for real-time cool visualization. That's quite cool.
I feel like the majority of the audience that we usually have here at Devoted SpeakEasy, mostly coming from game development, and a lot of us game development people are still kind of like cautious and afraid of virtual production. I would assume a lot of movie people are still also cautious and afraid of virtual production. Vitalii, what are the differences between the production workflows in video game versus, in virtual production that you have seen in your work? What are the things that are applicable and what are the things that were really, really painful for your team? Because you said you already had a bunch of experiments, and I would assume certain things you're like, yeah, I want to do more of that. And other things I'm like, don't want to do more of that.
There's two portions of it. One is pure technical, let's say, another one pure visual. So let's start with later on the visual. One of the biggest complaints, and that's the fact that many people from game development industry aren't familiar with film or episodic requirements for lighting. So when people do lighting setup, light work for games, it's optimized, it's more artistic, it serves a different purpose in games. For films, it has to be real. It has to be absolutely believable. It means not AAA, it's AAA kind of grade of quality for shadows, for absolutely everything. And the biggest complaints from DOPs and directors that it doesn't look real. And getting to this level of quality is a challenge because there is no training for it. There is no school that can teach you Unreal Engine and lighting setup for specific type of shot, environment, the weather conditions, day-night conditions to pull it off. And the challenge comes then, transfers to the technical aspect of things, like marrying the real set and the virtual set. And you have to match up the sand color, where you have to have external lights controlled by BMX or something, just to blend them in. And this is where Dani and people who work in the set kind of helping out, building those physical setups who even can have potential to be mixed up with digital assets. In terms of let's say, producing the content for virtual production, I think one of the big challenges here, many traditional visual effects companies aren't used to think of frame rate or amount of polygons or draw calls. Those are native words for anyone who works in real-time rendering, but it's very far off from VFX folks. So when you take any kind of development, or even if you try to connect and previous post with people with what need to be put in a wall, usually their scenes and content extremely heavy, super heavy. So applying all kind of optimization techniques just to get it up and running is can be quite challenging. And as a last one, I will say the getting ready for shots is kind of challenging because you never know what kind of director's demand and flexibility is expected here. He might say, well, let's change the color a little bit, or let's change the tiles, I don't know, reflectivity or color or tint or something. And then you might have 10 different camera positions or locations. And you have to have tools for this to make it happen in a click of a button, hotkeys, mappings.
When you were saying it, and maybe that's a question for everyone, right? When you were saying, oh, they're expecting the tools to be ready with a click of a button for those things to be sold. Are these tools prepackaged in Unreal, or it's like something that you guys build internally, or maybe there's extra tools, Dani, Joan, that you've built?
Yeah, some of it's just artistry. There is tech, but then there's artistry combined with the tech. So there's not one button that makes it photoreal. Yes, technical definitely supports the artistry. I had the honor of being able to work as producer this last week for a few days with Cook Optics and Arri as they did metadata testing. And it's fascinating. That's not my wheelhouse of expertise. It was really quite educational for me to see, what the results showed. And basically, for a producer, in layman's terms, is it speeds up. You don't need that camera to be, those lenses to be tested for a week or 2 weeks. And then you have to hold them. They can't be rented because you need them set like that till you're ready to shoot. Well, now they have a process where they can do it in a matter of minutes or hours, so it's, everything is progressing very quickly, but it is important that the tech does work with the artistry to get us the final result. So it's a balance.
What do you feel are the roles that are in the biggest demand to actually enable this seamless virtual production? And what are the hardest roles for you guys to hire? Or what are the people that you have on your team that you're like, I'm never letting you go? Like, you're with me forever. Otherwise, we can't do it.
We're looking for people with production background who also have Unreal background, which, because Unreal and because Epic offers so many opportunities for you to teach yourself, for you to go do that, we do find them, people who have just, this has been something they're really interested in, or they come through a VFX background and it's something they're fascinated. And obviously there's software outside of Unreal, which is also used for 2D playback. And so it's a bit of a VFX background, it's a bit of a software background, and then it is a little bit of a rock star background of being able to be the person on stage that can have a little bit of presence, be able to stay calm in a stressful environment. It's, it is a big skill set. And so that's why we put producers out there to try and help with that part of it so that the artist can really do their job as an engineer and as an artist to make the tech work.
But that's been the pain point because it is so new. Those artists are not trained. So you can't just, I think maybe this month you can hire a few more people out there organically, but 6 months ago, it's total training. We got our guys out of Engine who they started in the mid 90s, but they're gamers and they don't, they weren't filmmakers. So their whole perspective on filmmaking was they had to be trained into this art. So there is that ramping up point of getting people to understand the workflow, or just that they've been in it long enough that they know where all the 3 million clicks are within the Unreal of how to make something do it.
Vitalii, is there any roles that you feel are the most crucial for you guys?
Well, from our perspective and the type of jobs we're picking on, it's usually VAD content, it's usually optimization, either it's previous or building tools. We don't have much of a presence on set. That's why we focused more on the technical art and tools development. So technical artists who are capable enough kind of getting the job done is very, very unique set of skills specifically to a virtual production arena, because when the shot is set, it's not just the whole scene, it's specific area, specific that they have to understand what is in camera, what the lens is, where it's going to look, how to switch between the scenes, how to switch between this and this. So technical artist is always challenge, and there is no specific definition of technical artist. It's a person who technical enough to accomplish artistic art tasks. That's it, and they can vary a lot.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds to me that, virtual production is still very new and it doesn't look like a very oiled machine. Like, what are the pitfalls you would recommend for people who are just getting into to look out for? And how would you educate people on what's the state of the industry? What are the things that are not working? What are the things that could be working better? And what's the timeline for them to be in a better place?
I do think it's important to have good partners when you're figuring out, like Joan said, not every shot is a virtual production shot. And there are definitely some points of like, oh, everybody's doing virtual production. I want it on my movie, but it's not the right choice for certain steps. So that's a good thing to think about. So I think pitfalls, obviously tiles are still light. So getting your art department involved, like Vitalii said, of making sure that you understand how that light's going to affect the color of the things on stage and how those need to marry together is very important and not something that can really be fixed on the day. It needs pre-work. You need to have a plan for it. Talking about what the director and what shots they're really looking for, focus your art where that is. Optimization is so important. So think about what is the thing you want to do. So previs, tech viz, super important to make sure that you know what you're doing when you step on the stage. You really have to have a plan. You can improvise, but let's improvise after the plan has been executed for the day.
Yeah, I agree with that. It really is about prep. And if you really focus on that, you should have a very smooth day. I think sometimes people get also a little overwhelmed with it. And I'm not going to say the process is easy, but I think sometimes people overthink it. And if you prep, you should have a smooth flow, when you're on the wall or in production, and where you stand. So, and reach out to other teams, even if you aren't hiring them. I think people are sharing information. We want people to know how to do this because we want, if we're the only ones doing it, then it never picks up and the tech companies don't support it. But that's not the case. So we just want to, share with everyone. And we actually put together the Virtual Production Society, which is on Facebook, just to be able to share artists' work and have a forum where people can communicate and ask questions and learn. And it's amazing. We just put it up. We've about 12 months ago. We've never promoted it, never said anything publicly. And I think we just hit like 4,000 people this week or something. So it's just naturally grown.
I wonder, Vitalii, how you deal with that as somebody who's coming from game development and heavy technical experience, me included, who probably has very little patience when people don't understand the technical process and then move this button on the short and you're like, you can't move this button. It's already baked. This is it. We would need to redo the whole thing. There's no way back. No, we need to move the button. Was it more challenging 3 years ago, a little bit easier right now with your clients? How do you educate them? What are the expectations you set from the get-go about the process when that they haven't had experience in virtual production? Or you're like, you haven't worked with virtual production? I'm not working with you. Go try on somebody else and then come back to me.
And the problem here that as a studio who kind of tapping into the world of cinematography, we have to learn what actually happening on set, what kind of vocabulary people are using, what the terms means, what kind of processes, professionals. However, kind of bringing the case that other side from cinematographer's point of view, either as director or DOP, have to learn, let's say, what virtual production people are doing can be challenging. This disconnect between misunderstanding of capability of the tech and the needs of those who are capable of delivering the tech is a mutual kind of education process. And I think the biggest, let's say, pitfall here is that getting this education process is a challenge because there's a time commitment. It's a resource sharing. This was a very big hype, especially during the COVID times, because of the restrictions and stuff like this. A lot of studios popped up, right? It helped the production and propelled the industry. But now hype goes down because it's not a silver bullet. It's another tool, expensive tool, complex tool, but very powerful tool that I think we've all seen many cases where the shots been put on the wall just shouldn't be there at all, just because it was, hey, let's put the shot. Well, it shouldn't be there, but it looks cool. It's expensive, which shouldn't happen. That's why avoiding the situation, even talking to, when we receive a script to break down, it's the first question. All right, how competent the other side, the producer or production designer, even to understand what we're trying to bring in? How complicated should we buy into risking and recommending this workflow, or it's too complex for this group of people? It's this type of challenge. I don't see they coming away anytime soon, for a simple reason that Unreal Engine advances with ray tracing, with Lumen, bunch of other tech, the whole stack of technologies advancing. Nerve rendering, this is neural fields rendering coming in, totally new stuff even for us. Nobody knows what limitations are.
All of you guys are very successful in landing virtual production business, and a lot of people who are starting in the industry. How do you source your client? How do you land your clients? What are the issues, or what are the beauty of working with certain types of clients? If you could share a little bit of that, I think that would be very beneficial for our audience.
Well, our clients range, and I think that they found us through, I think in the first year or 9 months, we had like 35 articles written on us. So it just depends, where someone's starting and where they find you. It's come on faster now, but it was very slow to grow. Or even a year ago, we were asked to we have done some car work, but there was a specific big brand who would not pull the trigger because they were too scared they might not be able to do it. The ad agency and the production company were nervous, but they wanted to do one shot. They wanted to shoot the salt flats, which the environmentalists won't let them do. So they were just going to do the dry lake bed. Well, I said, we can give you the salt flats on the moon if you want. You don't have to do without the salt flats. You can have it. And they said, yeah, but we want to drive 70 miles an hour down. And I said, then we'll move the screen. We'll make the particle simulation. And we showed them at first blush. It was a $1.8 million commercial. And we showed them just at first blush, we could save them anywhere from $600,000 to $800,000. And they, for one, they were too late in the food chain because, see, they've already started shooting. So it's really about educating people so they know from onset of concept and then you workflow. So a lot of times it was like knee-jerk reaction. Hey, we've got this. We wanted to do this, but now we're thinking, let's just do a shot on the stage and do virtual production. Well, they weren't that prepared for it, but we could have made it happen. But more than anything, they were scared. You can sit there and save them that much money, but they don't know enough about it. So that was 9 months ago on that client, and I know that they are starting to change and move into that arena. So it's just been a process and a progress, a natural progress. And I think more and more people are getting educated just as a whole.
I think clients for us, obviously we have a bit of a reputation in the industry, so that helps. They come to us because we're Lux. And because they know the projects we've done. We've also been doing a lot of outreach. We did a great event for the PGA, which, like Joan talked about, we took them in the set. We let them touch it. It was not just talking heads. We're working on things for for ADG and DGA. And so there's a lot of those kinds of events that happen. And then also, of course, we have a lot of trusted partners, DPs, producers who've worked with us in the past and know the results that we can deliver, especially when we're doing productions in places like Australia, where they're going to bring us there. They want to make sure that they've already worked with us. They know what they're going to get. They know the quality is going to be there because it is so far and distant. So
love it. Vitalii, I know that you have an extensive relationship with Epic, and that's kind of also a source of the partnerships for you.
My research I'm not yet building the brand of Pixela, I'm not doing much of outreach because it's so very specific and small niche these days. Right? It's something that you have to commit for years to know the people, to know the production. If you look up how many films or episodic produced in North America or Europe per year, you can kind of think of how many efforts been put there, how many studios out there. So it's a small area, I would say, compared to this game development. Game development arena is $100 billion industry a year. Visual production is a much, much smaller. In our case, it's all word by mouth. Absolutely. Yep. For since we know the tech, people reaching out for a very specific type of problems with their productions, and it helps to solve it. Either it's content-wise or specific visual production stack of tools problem, and helping them out builds our reputation, so they come back later for the next show.
I appreciate all of you. Anything you want to close out with? Anything that you felt prompt to add but didn't feel like there was a moment to share?
Yeah, I think I missed to explain one of the key elements of the in-camera stage itself. It's a big, giant lighting device in the first place. And the second, it's a source of pixels for camera. That's all about. Fix lighting, get the pixels to the camera.
That seems like an easy job, huh? Right? Dani and Joan?
I think that when you were talking about, reasons to use virtual production, that there's kind of three reasons that I think it's creativity. There's something you creatively can't do without it, and that's an awesome moment. It's logistics. I can't get my star where I need to go. I can't film at the Salt Lakes, right? I want to film in a space where I couldn't do it before. And it's budget. Sometimes it is not realistic to bring a whole team someplace. And from a budget standpoint, sometimes you get 3 or 4 setups in a day. It's a huge savings of money, right? Or I've already shot this. I have it. I have the asset. Now I just want to do it, budget. So I think those 3 things are a lot of what bring people to virtual production. And sometimes we need to remember that those are the 3 things we're looking for: creativity, logistics, and budget. What's the reason you're doing it? It probably falls under one of those 3 things.
And to add to Dani, that is right. And it's the control of that is so important to the producer. And the producer owns the set because they want all their talent to be doing their jobs, but they need to control creativity and cost. And everyone is really intimidated by it. And then, in fact, if you plan it prior and don't just jump in and do some knee-jerk reaction, it is cheaper. And we will vouch for that because now it depends on the setup and who you're directing and how big the scene is and how many actors. But we've been able to hammer out as many as 5 environment sets in one day and wrap 4 hours early. My director and business partner, Peter, has never wrapped a day early or a second early in his life. And 4 hours early, he would think like, well, what more could I do? Or I have this stage available and I can just be, he's just eats and breathes filmmaking, And so we have seen the results and they are fascinating. That is a cost control.
I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for participating in our roundtable. I feel like each and everyone's contribution was foundational to make it a very productive. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward for other shoots with you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.